I learned about Roberto Burle Marx in the University of Florida in Design on the Land, one of our textbooks by Newton. And then he came and he lectured in 1979. I was up there because I had to take a lot of prerequisite classes to be able to get into the landscape architecture program, which is in the College of Architecture at the University of Florida. So I was taking all these architectural design classes and history and theory and structures and everything. And I really love architecture, so I was sort of being coached to maybe decide to be an architect instead of a landscape architect. And then one day I found the book, The Tropical Gardens of Roberto Burle Marx, and it just changed my whole idea of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I sought Burle Marx as a mentor. I didn't take a job when I graduated. I started my own firm. I was design build, so I could take the time I needed to go down to Brazil. And for 13 years I'd go down to Brazil and I'd spend time. I just became part of his entourage. And these are all these images that I saw when I was a 25-year-old guy kicking around Brazil, meeting all these great Brazilian designers and Roberto's clients and his family of his whole studio and what have you. I used to work out of my house and I was the only employee. And eventually, you know, I moved around a little bit. I lived in Key West for 7 years and had a studio. And then I lived in Fort Lauderdale. I always sort of had a home studio. I worked out of the house. This is our studio on the river, downtown Miami, where we were for 14 years. All these projects I'm going to show you are projects that I do with my incredible team. My life partner and my business partner, Raymond Jungles, is here in the audience somewhere, and I thank her for everything that she's done to help me become a better human and business person. This is our studio in Coconut Grove. It was designed by Lester Pancoast, who was a good friend of Roberto Burle Marx's and was very instrumental in my being able to obtain a mentorship with Burle Marx. He was actually married to David Fairchild's granddaughter, who was just a wonderful person and an artist. We bought the building in 2016 and gutted the whole thing and completely rebuilt it. And this is the home of our studio. And we have about 20 people working there. It's 2 miles from where I live. I ride my bike to work every day. I have a very charmed life, and I do what I love, which is one of the things Burle Marx always said: do what you like. This is the space on the left where I work with my team and myself, and I design there. And then we have 3 floors. And we landscaped an entire city block. I got permission from the city and the county, who own the adjacent right-of-ways. And we just kind of extended. It's sort of we use mostly native plants there. It's something that we really try to do in our firm is bring the habitat back that was there before the humans came in and removed it. Trying to bring the city, bring nature back into the city. Typical sidewalk, we put the sidewalks in. There were no sidewalks. And yes, it's a little bit jungle-esque. Naples Botanical Gardens, we do a lot of residential work. That's sort of how we were able to build the firm, through getting work published, and then all of our work is by word of mouth. And usually when we get into a new area and we do one project, that's how we start expanding into that area. This is a project we did with Lake Flato in Naples. We worked from the beginning in the master plan with multiple landscape architects in Lake Flato. And we did the visitor center there. We've done visitor center, the Brazilian garden, and the Florida garden there. I love this building because it's really not a building. It's the garden itself is the main feature here. Very light and airy. We've been able to do a few projects with Lake Flato, and I really enjoy working with them. This is a view from the Brazilian garden looking back to the prow, as Lake Flato called it, which was the main viewpoint when you leave the visitor center to move into the garden sequence. Each one of us landscape architects was given $1 million and 2 acres, I think it was, and we were told that people needed to spend at least 20 minutes in each garden. And it was a lot of fun. And today I got to see the Arboretum, which has a lot of similar characteristics to what we were able to do at Naples Botanical Gardens. Here at the Brazilian Garden, the drawing you see on the left is actually my work drawing. You know, as I had to use only Brazilian plants. And fortunately in Florida, there's a lot of great collectors of plants. So I was able to get a lot of different plants from many different sources. And it's one of the most fun projects I've done. One of the things I was able to do with Roberto was I helped him sell his artwork, because he was as famous in Brazil as an artist as he was a landscape architect. And then he'd give me a commission for selling his art, and then I would take the commission and I would buy his art. So I have a very big collection of his work, which that inspires me every day. And I had this a mural in boxes for 15 years, and I wanted to get it out where the public could see it. And I used it in the 2009 New York Botanical Garden Orchid Show. And then when they gave me the job to do the Florida Garden at the Naples Botanical Gardens, after we'd worked on the master plan, I said, I've got to get this out in the public. So I put it in the Florida Garden. And Ted Flato said, well, wait a second. Who here knows Brazil and Brazilian plants better than Raymond? And then he says, I want that mural opposite the prow. So then I switched from the Florida Garden to the Brazilian Garden. And then somehow I got my hands on the visitor center, and eventually I was able to do the Florida Garden over. So if you ever get a chance to go to Naples, it has a great botanical garden. We do, you know, not early on, but eventually we started doing more public type projects. This is a project we did with Herzog and Demeron and Lincoln Road. It used to be a Morris Lapidus block that was done, but then they opened it back up to vehicular traffic. And working with Robert Wennett, the developer, we did in Herzog and Demeron, we did these kind of drawings to. That's actually my drawing. I had everybody in my team do a different design for this block so that we get all the ideas out, and we're able to convince the city and the Lapidus Foundation to close the street again and make it. It's the western end of Lincoln Road, the pedestrian mall. And it's a very cool parking garage that also has a space on the 7th floor that they do weddings and all kinds of public events for rent. I use the Pedra Portuguesa from Brazil as a pavement. It discourages skateboarders, and you know, it doesn't fade. In Brazil, it's actually, they use it in all the sidewalks because it's less expensive than even asphalt in Brazil. And we brought, this project was named the Urban Glade by the planners in the city of Miami Beach, because I brought it's mostly all native plants. And the whole theme was, you know, water. We have so much water in Florida that we wanted to bring back water into the urban environment. And all 4 of these ponds we have, they're all natural ponds, have one system for filtration and everything. And it's really a very successful block and one of my favorite projects that I've done. And then after we got permission to do that, and to build the building, we were able to do the penthouse, which is a developer's project on top of the building, on top of the garage. And I thought this was one of the coolest projects that I've ever seen, so we kind of nicknamed it the Bat Cave in our office, because who does this sort of a thing, you know? So we were able to, with very little soil depth, we were able to, using mostly vines and some mounding, to be able to get a pretty thick amount of vegetation on top of this concrete structure. And they also, Herzog and Demeron also did the interiors, which they very seldom do for residential projects, and it's really remarkable. Not far, so I live about 2 miles from where I work, and about halfway between the two is this project we did in Coconut Grove, where we actually did the site planning and the massing for this entrance feature that was going to be done. It was going to be a series of houses done by all Pritzker Prize winners. That ended up not happening because the developer during COVID decided to sell the property, sold for over $100 million, and now it's sort of, it's either going to be developed for 6 houses or 1 estate. But we worked with Rene Gonzalez and the client to finalize the architecture with the stone cladding and the Corten steel. But what we did was we set the wall back to the building setback of 50 feet and put that 50 feet of property outside to the community so that people, this is on a historic scenic highway, so that the community could really enjoy the space and enjoy the garden. One of the things that's great about being in Miami, I moved to Miami when I was 18 in 1974, and it was a different kind of a place. It was a sleepy place. Miami Beach was really a retirement community. Is that what has happened to Miami since then? You know, it's an international city. You know, it's sort of the de facto capital of Latin America. And the Cuban population, the Cubans that moved there have really made it into a vibrant city, and it's a very exciting place to live. And now we have all these great architects who are coming there doing wonderful projects. This is a project that we did with Marcel Kogan and MK27. You see the site plan on the right, there's actually 2 houses. It was done by a developer, a builder who specializes in high-end residential, and he did this project as a spec project to keep his crews busy. On the lower part is a house we did with Ceuta, and that sold for $22 million. But this was before COVID. The prices in Miami right now are insane, and Palm Beach as well. But what I loved about this project was Marcia's idea to, the main entrance to the house is on the 2nd floor. The bedrooms are on the ground floor. And you basically move through the garden up this ramp to get to the entrance on the 2nd floor, which is very poetic. And you know, one of the things I love about gardens and architecture is the choreography of movement through the space. To me, when we design gardens, it's all about, you know, maximizing the experiences that we can give people in those spaces. And you can see, even though there was only about 20 feet between the 2 fairly large, the Ceuta house was much larger in scale, but it had a lot of cutouts inside for atrium gardens. They really do a great job at integrating the interior and the exterior, which is one of our big principles, is the blurring of boundaries, the fusing of interior and exterior space, and then not really knowing where the edge of the property is. So we like to create this sort of edge of the woods look and not really see any adjacent structures. But like I say, there's a big house right next door, and you can see with just, and these photos were taken less than 2 years after the project was finished. We've done a few projects with Studio Ramos. They're based in Argentina, and they do very beautiful work. Nacho Ramos leads the firm, and his son works with him, and they have an office in Chicago and Buenos Aires, and also in Long Island in the Hamptons. This project we just finished about 1.5 years ago, And I'm not an expert in temperate plants, even though I kind of grew up in the Midwest and Southern California. I know a lot of plants. And one of the things I also want to say about a firm is we are plant-centric. I love plants. I can't believe I have a job where I can get paid to study plants. So when I get to work in different regions, it gives me a whole nother opportunity to learn about plants that I don't know. But here I worked with Patrick Kulina, who's a horticulturist who does a lot of planting design for landscape architects in the Northeast. I met him actually through Reed Hildebrand. And I was able to do the schematic design and design development, and he did the final plant selection based on what we were trying to achieve. One of the things that we do a lot of is we do a lot of the hardscape. We do most of the hardscape in the projects that we do. When I say that, though, we do it in collaboration with the interior designers and with the architects. And our mission, we love doing collaboration. And our mission is to make it look like it was all done by one hand, that there's total harmony. It's not like we're trying to show what we did and show what they did. We're trying to enhance everything that we're working on. This is a project in the Bahamas, in Lyford Key in the Nassau area that we just finished about a year ago. It was an existing residence that really looked like a total teardown, but Nacho was able to, create new walls and cover the roof and make it and create this and let the garden work through the space to where it feels like it was an entire new structure that's tied into the garden. The client is also an art dealer, besides being Sean Connery's son. And nowadays, it seems like all of our clients want a padel court. And, and I've heard, oh, don't plant trees because they cast shadows in it. No, all of our padel courts are like nestled into like a beautiful garden. And what I love about padel courts is they don't take as much space as tennis courts. We do a lot of work in the Caribbean. We do about 60% residential. We do a lot of work in Central America and the Caribbean mostly. We've done some work in California, some far, New York, that are more temporary gardens other than the Ford Foundation. But our wheelhouse is really subtropical gardens. This is the private island in the Exumas. And our client's one of the 4 owners of the private island that's now going to be, we're working with Olsen Kundig on the master plan, and then there's going to be villas and private residential lots. But we completed this project, well, during COVID, so about 3 years ago, I would say. One of the toughest sites as far as wind and salt. One of the great things, though, about working in the Caribbean is pretty much the same plants we have in South Florida. We get a little bit more rain in Florida and the mainland than in the Caribbean. We get about 60 inches of rain a year. Sometimes 12 inches within 24 hours. But you guys get those events here too, I've been told. But you get about 40 inches of rain a year, I was told. Most of the Caribbean islands we work on get about 40 to 45 inches of rainwater a year. So we create these leeward gardens behind the architecture that you can get a lot more lush, and it's a lot more protected. So you can create your own little. And the way we control rainwater on site, we always move it to what we call shallow retention areas and let it percolate and really benefit the plant materials. So you can get a lot healthier plants than what you would normally have with the topography where the water comes down and just runs off the site. So the main thing in the Caribbean, you get amazing sun, which is the energy for the plants. And if you, not a lot of great soils, most of our plants we go into just the existing soil on site. But if you can create flat areas where the water doesn't run off and deeper soil, you can really get amazing growth. one of the main things we do when we get to a site is try to preserve as much of what's there as possible. And then we like to consider what we do almost more ecological restorations, bringing plants back that should be there, than trying to do a whole new take on what should be on the site, and try to create Fiji in the Bahamas, which many people do. Everybody has this image of what a tropical garden should look like. We try to make our gardens look like they're from the place. We didn't use one coconut on that project, for instance. This project with Big is just about 3 blocks from where our office is. I ride my bike through this cool sidewalk we're able to do along the lower side of this image. We finished this job in 2017, just before we moved into our office in 2018. In 2017, in September, we had Hurricane Irma, which was a Category 4. And fortunately, not a whole lot of damage happened to the project. A bunch of trees had to be straightened back out. But it's really grown and well. The image on the right is an image that I took on one of my bike rides to work the other day. And that's actually the ADA ramp to get up to the main level. It just kind of weaves through the garden at a 5% slope. Once again, working in collaboration with Bjarke and his team, this was such a fun project. The problem sometimes when you're working with really great design firms is, we're done with contract documents, but we're still designing. And then they were done before me, and they're like, all right, Raymond, now we have to do gates and we have to do the outside kitchen. You're there, why don't you do those things? And I'm like, okay. And I like to tell my great team that it's not about, sometimes you lose money on projects. It's really, the money kind of comes and goes. It moves through the accounts. But what's so valuable is the final product, because that's what, it just keeps bringing you joy and business from that moment on. And we worked with different architects on this project before they brought Bjarke in, and we actually site planned it to say, well, they were going to have 2 towers and they were going to cut the site in half. And I told the developer, we don't take any projects where landscape is not a major contributing element. We don't do decoration, we don't do foundation plantings. And when they brought Big in, it just became a whole new fun project. And that's how we decide what projects we're going to do, basically, is they have to be fun, and we have to like the people who are doing them. This is a recent project with Herzog & Demeron in Sunny Isles. It's a 70-story building, condo. They don't really do a lot of projects like these, but it was a lot of fun. I've worked with Christine Binswanger on the 3 different projects we've done with Herzog & Demeron, and it's been just wonderful. And when I met with Robert, when they first came into town and they were interviewing landscape architects for their project, they were talking to everybody in town, and then I had the meeting and I brought just one project. It was a little project that we did in Key West. This is one of the ones that we won a national award from the ASLA on. And it was a little house that was built in the 40s, like a ranch-style house. And we re-envisioned the whole house in the garden and did all the structures as well as the floor plan of the house. And I said to Christine, I said, we did all the structures on this project. And she said to me, landscape architects don't do structures on Herzog & Demeron projects. And I thought, I didn't get that project. But I was very surprised when I came back. Of course, we worked for almost nothing on that, that block on Lincoln Road till it became a real project. But on this project, we did all the hardscape. Once again, in collaboration with Herzog & Demeron. But we did the pools, all the driveways, the grading. Not the architecture, of course. But for instance, we did this bench, we did the decks. And also trying to make it all flow together so that it looks like one hand did it. Another very difficult site. And Difficult sites. This is one of the most difficult sites I've ever worked on. First of all, plants really don't belong indoors. You should have big windows and have the plants outdoors where they really want to be and then integrate with nature that way. But you don't turn down a project like this. So I've had to turn down interior project census because we really don't want to do a lot of interior projects. Trees do not live indefinitely inside. But we're able to take Dan Kiley's original idea and bring it back to life, because this project was, when we got involved, it was a project that was done in the mid-60s that eventually they just started, the local people who were doing the maintenance just started bringing whatever plants they brought up from Florida that were, just to green it up. So as my client Shelby White said, it was a collection of mall plants. And working with Gensler and the Ford Foundation, we're able to, reinterpret what Dan Kiley wanted to do. The building, all the hardscape couldn't be touched. But the landscape was not protected. It was our idea to bring back what Dan Kiley's idea was, which was basically a forest within a city, because everybody knows Dan Kiley's work. It's great, everything in a line, bosks of trees and groves. This wasn't that. So one of the most interesting things was trying to figure out his organizational structure for this garden. And what it was all about really was movement through the space. And as you move around this orthogonal geometry, your point of perspective just changes constantly. And these photographs were taken right when the job was finished. And it's still looking really good. That was 2019. And each one of these big trees came up in one semi, and they all were grown in Florida. One of the interesting things was they didn't acclimate any of the trees in the first installation of the Ford Foundation. So we learned from that, and we collected all the big trees from there. Most of them were in the field where they were dug, and then moved them into a big shade house. But we had brought all the big trees to the nursery, and they had built the structure for the shade house, but they hadn't put the fabric on yet because it was just before Hurricane Irma hit. And this project almost didn't happen. If the shade cloth had already been up and the trees would have been in, it would have been a different story. So this was one of the most harrowing projects I've ever done, because everything mattered so much. And there's a really great, if you go on the Ford Foundation website, there's a time-lapse video of this that shows it took years to get all the asbestos out and to do all the improvements in the architecture. But then the landscape just comes in the last 2 seconds of that video. It's pretty amazing to see. And we worked a spider crane into the corner. So the one thing we were allowed to do was to take out a few panes of glass to be able to get the crane in and to bring the equipment in, but we weren't allowed to touch any of the other architectural elements. This is a project we did with Foster Partners. We did the whole Fina district, the hotel. This is a condo right on the beach. We do a lot of work in Miami Beach. We did all the hardscape here, working with Brandon Haw, who was running the New York office at the time. Great architect. Usually when I talk, this is a very difficult thing because I wanted to show you guys so much. But usually when we talk, we like to show before pictures and after, because the difference is just people just go, wow. Because this was just concrete and a hole in the ground. And if you plant the right plants in the right proportion, the right scale, we always put the emphasis on the trees. The smaller stuff can grow and fine, but it's all about proportion. We always try to create gardens that look like they've always been there. Not something that was man-made. We love it when people just don't even know what we did, basically. Working with Bryce and Helen Marden down in Nevis, we got to work on this great project with Ed Tuttle. He did that, did the new restaurant part that you see there on the image on the right. We did all the hardscape, the steps. It was very interesting because it's one big volcano, the island, and there's these amazing boulders that we were finding. Our job was to try to figure out where you could park cars for the new restaurant and get them out of where they were parking, which was not very convenient to the whole overall operation. But once we started digging the flat areas for the cars, we became a boulder factory. And what they used to do there is to just push the boulders down the hill into the gut because they didn't want to deal with them. These are boulders that would cost you a fortune if you were living in a city and wanted the boulders for your projects. But so we worked with Bryce Martin, who of course is this, he unfortunately passed away last year, or a little bit more than a year ago, but he just loved boulders. So he'd get out there and he'd work with us. We'd find boulders like this on the image on the, I guess it's your right, my left. That huge boulder, it was just sticking out of the ground about this far from where the road was. I said, I think there's a huge boulder here. And sure enough, it was so big we couldn't really move it more than just 10 feet to get out of the way of the road. But I used to have dreams of just digging in the earth and finding boulders when we were doing this project. I don't know how many of you guys dream about projects, but it's endless. But none of them make sense most of the time. But somehow it's just your subconscious working things. This was a historic sugar plantation, so there's beautiful ruins of that. This giant kapok tree has been there hundreds of years. And we created this fountain that used to be the way they used to collect the water from the hard surfaces to take to the cistern, which is that element you see, the building up there. And it hadn't ever worked. So we had this idea to get it working again, make it into a fountain versus just a way to get water to the cistern. So we created this fountain element that the whole idea was, and we found the coolest boulder that we found in all of our digging, we used as a stone that the water would drop down on. It makes a beautiful sound when you're eating up in Ed Tuttle's restaurant. We love working in Mexico. The climate's fairly similar to here. A lot of the same trees that we use there are here. The work we do is in San Pedro Garza mostly, and it's right up against the Chapinque National Forest, which is the Sierra Madres there are just incredible, and it's sort of in the background of almost all of our projects. And they do amazing work there, and the workers, they have great trees in the industry, but no one grows native plants of the medium, the arbustos and the smaller plants. So I'm always trying to get people to grow things that aren't in the industry. In fact, everybody uses just the common local names there in Spanish. So we had to create a whole master list with botanical names so that everybody could look up the plants that we really wanted to use so that we leveled the playing field. And my client's father had a nursery. He was from a family that had a big steel factory, but he was the only one of the brothers that didn't work in it, and he just loved growing plants. So this was a very special project for my client because his father had left him this nursery, and he had all these great trees that were his dad's favorite trees, and we were able to use them all on his project. And there's beautiful mountains. This is called Mitras, which you see off when the sun's setting, it hits this mountain. And one of my earliest influences, in fact, my earliest influence with design was I was in a dentist's office once. I hated going to the dentist's office, but there was this magazine and it had one of Luis Barragan's projects in it, and it was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen, with these horses and these bright colors and these fountains and everything. And I actually stole the magazine. Don't tell anybody. I guess I just did. But anyway, so I love the way that that he would bring the landscape into his gardens. And so this image of the little window you see with Mitras there, that was going to be a solid wall that separated the master bathroom garden from the rest of the space. But I said, if we leave a hole in this wall, you're going to be able to see this mountain, when the sun's setting. And so we ended up calling the garden Ventana a la Montaña. And this is our home. Architectonica is a local firm. I mean, they're international, but they're very big in Miami. And they raised their family here. They built this house in the early 80s, raised 6 kids here. And when Gene and I moved back down to Coconut Grove from Fort Lauderdale, we rented this house for 4.5 years. We loved how convenient it was. It was looking pretty ugly at the time, we have to say, but it was sort of a postmodern, sort of an in-between sort of a thing, but it had great interior space. And eventually we were able to purchase it, and we ended up, we painted it black so that it would disappear in the vegetation. And initially when we bought it, we had all these ideas to open bigger, windows of glass to the garden, and then realized that if we did that, we'd have to move, and we couldn't afford the work. So we decided to just put all the money in the garden, which we just finished last year. So Jungles lives in the jungle. And if you've ever been to Coconut Grove, it's the old part of Miami. It was there before Miami. It was founded in the early to mid 1800s. And to get to Coconut Grove, most people, there was no roads or railroads that took you to South Florida. You'd take a steamship down to Key West, and then you'd take a sailboat back up to Coconut Grove. That's how you got there. And Gina did all the beautiful tile work there. That used to be where my home studio was. Videos are always the best way to see gardens. appreciate you coming.